The dust swirled around Cathara's feet. As she walked through the ruins, her long blue fingers traced the broken walls of what had once been a great city. The buildings were old, so old that even her people had no memory of who built them. She was a Zapirian, and her kind lived for 300 years, but these ruins were much older than that. Cathara was an archaeologist. She studied old things, dead civilizations, and forgotten secrets. Most of her colleagues worked on famous dig sites near the center of the galaxy. They found pretty artifacts that museums wanted to buy, but Cathara liked the rim worlds, the forgotten places where no one else bothered to look. This planet was called Zirian 7. It orbited a dying red star at the edge of known space. The planet was cold and empty now, but once it had been home to millions of beings. Cathara wanted to know what happened to them. She knelt down beside a strange device half buried in the rubble. It looked like a data storage unit, but it was made from material she had never seen before. The metal was black and seemed to absorb light. When she touched it, the device suddenly came to life. Holographic text appeared in the air above the device. The language was old, but Cathara's translator could handle it. What she read made her blood run cold. Day 4847. Since the Great Silence began, the sleepers have been quiet for over 13 years now. Some of our people think they are gone forever, but the old ones remember the stories. They say the sleepers only rest. Cathara sat back on her heels. Sleepers? What were sleepers? She had never heard this term in any historical record. She kept reading. The human protocols are still in effect. All ships must avoid the quarantine zones. The defense networks are still active even after all this time. We don't know how their machines can run for so long without maintenance. Human protocols. Cathara had never heard of humans either. According to everything she knew, there were only 847 known species in the galaxy. Humans were not one of them. She spent the next 3 days searching through the ruins. In every building, she found more data devices. Each one told the same strange story. There had been a species called humans. They had been powerful, more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Then they had disappeared. But the records called it the Great Silence, not an extinction. The beings who wrote these records believed the humans were still alive, somewhere sleeping and waiting. Cathara found star charts that showed huge areas of space marked with warning symbols. The charts called these areas quarantine zones. Ships were forbidden to enter them. The charts were 10,000 years old, but they showed the same star patterns that existed today. On her last day on Zirian 7, Cathara made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the ruins of what had been a government building, she found a vault. Inside the vault was a data core the size of her fist. When she activated it, it projected a 3-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. The map showed the galaxy as it had been 10,000 years ago, but it looked very different from the galaxy she knew. Huge sections of space were colored red. The legend said these were human territories. According to this map, humans had controlled almost half of the known galaxy. Cathara counted the star systems in the red zones. There were over 50,000 of them. That was more stars than the entire galactic consortium controlled. Today, how could one species have been so powerful? She copied all the data she could carry and flew back to the consortium capital on Nexus Prime. The journey took 2 weeks, and during that time, Cathara studied everything she had found. The more she learned, the more frightened she became. The records spoke of wars that had reshaped entire star systems. They mentioned weapons that could destroy suns and fleets that could move faster than light itself. They described humans as beings who thought differently from everyone else in the galaxy. While other species fought for territory or resources, humans fought for ideas and principles that no one else could understand. When Cathara arrived at Nexus Prime, she requested a meeting with the Historical Council. The council was made up of the galaxy's greatest scholars and historians. They were responsible for maintaining the official records of galactic history. The council met in a great hall with walls made of living crystal. Representatives from dozens of species sat around a circular table. At the head of the table sat Quinth, the oldest being in the consortium. Quintin's was an ethereal, a species that could live for thousands of years. They were over 1,000 years old and had served on the council for 8 centuries. Cathara presented her findings to the council. She showed them the data, devices, the star charts, and the territorial maps. She explained about the quarantine zones and the human protocols. When she finished, the hall was silent. Then Council Member Vexnar, a proud hegemony bureaucrat, began to laugh. "This is mythology," he said, "fairy tales told by primitive civilizations to explain natural disasters. There are no humans, there never were." Other council members nodded in agreement. They pointed out that 8,000 years ago, their ancestors had performed the Great Data Purge. They had destroyed all records of the Dark Ages to focus on building a better future. The old stories were just superstition and fear, but Quinthus did not laugh. The ancient ethereal stared at Cathara's evidence with troubled eyes. When the other council members finished dismissing her findings, Quintin spoke in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "I remember stories," Quinthus said. "Stories my great grandmother told me when I was young." She said there had been a time of great terror when gods walked among the stars and worlds died at their whim. The other council members looked uncomfortable. Quintin continued. "The story said these gods had the faces of simple creatures like the animals we keep as pets. But behind those innocent faces were minds that could bend reality to their will." Vexener scoffed. "Superstition and myth. We are the most advanced civilization in galactic history. We have achieved peace among 847 species." The council voted to classify Cathara's findings as mythology and file them away in the archives. But as the meeting ended, Quinz approached Cathara privately. "Child," the ancient being whispered, "if even half of what you found is true, then we are all in terrible danger. Quarantine zones you discovered, they still exist. I have seen the star charts. Ships that enter those areas are never seen again." Quintin's placed a withered hand on Cathara's shoulder. "But what if they are not dead? What if they are only sleeping?" Cathara left the council chambers with a growing sense of dread. She had uncovered evidence of something terrible, something the galaxy had chosen to forget. But forgetting and being forgotten were two very different things. Somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars in the quarantine zones, that Ships feared to enter, something was waiting, something that had once ruled half the galaxy with power beyond imagination, something that had gone to sleep voluntarily, giving the rest of the galaxy a gift of peace. But gifts could be taken away, and after 10,000 years of silence, some fools might be tempted to see if the sleeping gods were really dead. Cathara looked up at the stars through her apartment window on Nexus Prime. Somewhere out there in the darkness, between worlds, the sleepers waited, and for the first time in 10,000 years, someone remembered they existed. The question was, what would happen when others learned the truth? 6 months after Cathara's discovery, the corporate executives were getting excited. Vexter, the chief operations officer of Megacorp Stellar Dynamics, sat in his luxury office on Nexus Prime and studied the profit reports. The numbers looked very good indeed. Stellar Dynamics was the largest mining and salvage company in the galaxy. They specialized in finding valuable resources on dead worlds and extracting ancient technology from ruins. Vexter had built his fortune by going where others feared to travel and taking what they left behind. When Cathara's report about the quarantine zones was filed in the public archives, Vexter had his best analysts study every word. What they found made him very happy. The quarantine zones contained some of the richest star systems in the galaxy, systems full of rare minerals, abandoned space stations, and most importantly, ancient technology that no one had claimed. Vexter was a hegemony, a species known for their business skills and their ability to see profit where others saw only problems. The hegemony had 4 arms and skin that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, Vexter's skin was bright gold, which meant he was very pleased with himself. The historical council can call it mythology all they want, Vexter told his board of directors. But those energy readings don't lie. There are massive power sources in those quarantine zones. The board members nodded eagerly. They represented 12 different species, but they all spoke the same language when it came to profit. Ancient technology was worth more than entire planets. If they could claim salvage rights to even one of those quarantine zones, they would own patents on devices that the rest of the galaxy would pay billions to use. But there was one problem. The quarantine zones were still forbidden by ancient laws that no one really understood anymore. Ships that entered those areas disappeared, and their automated distress beacons went silent. The Galactic Consortium's military refused to escort civilian ships into those regions. Vexter solved this problem by going around the military entirely. He petitioned the historical council directly, arguing that the quarantine zones were based on primitive superstition. He pointed out that the consortium needed new sources of energy and technology to support their growing population. He offered to share all discoveries with the member species and to fund a proper scientific expedition to study these mysterious areas. The council debated for weeks. Most members agreed with Vexter that the quarantine zones were probably just natural hazards or the remnants of ancient automated defense systems. After 10,000 years, surely any technology left behind would have broken down or run out of power. Only Quince voted against the expedition. The ancient ethereal reminded the council of the old stories. and warned that some mysteries were better left unsolved, but Quintance was outvoted by a wide margin. The other council members called their concerns outdated and superstitious. The expedition was approved and scheduled to depart within 3 months. Vexter was put in charge of the civilian components while Commander Nauk of the Krillian Defense Force would provide military escort and security. Keith was invited to join as the chief archaeologist despite her concerns about the mission. Commander Nauk was a veteran officer who had served in the consortium's military for over 50 years. The Krillians were a warrior species with natural armor plating and 6 eyes that could see in multiple spectrums. Nauk had fought in the last 3 border conflicts and had a reputation for being both brave and careful, but even Nauk was curious about the quarantine zones. His military databases contained references to automated defense networks that had been active for thousands of years. Some of his colleagues believed these networks were left behind by the ancients, a legendary species that had supposedly built wonders throughout the galaxy before vanishing into myth. The expedition fleet consisted of 12 ships. Stellar Dynamics provided 4 heavy mining vessels equipped with the most advanced excavation equipment money could buy. The consortium military contributed 3 escort frigates and a command cruiser. The remaining ships carried scientists, archaeologists, and representatives from various member species who wanted to witness this historic mission. According to Cathara's research, this system had shown the strongest energy readings in all the quarantine zones. If they were going to find answers about the mysterious humans, this was the best place to start looking. The journey to Sol's Rest took 2 weeks. Through hyperspace, as they traveled, Cathara studied the historical records. One more time, she found references to this system in several of the data cores she had recovered, but they also contained warnings that made her sleep poorly. A third simply said, "Do not wake the children of Terra." When the expedition dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, everyone on board fell silent. What they saw defied all their expectations. The system contained 8 planets, orbiting a young yellow star. The third planet from the star was blue and green, and covered with white clouds. It looked like a paradise world, the kind of planet that colonies paid billions to settle, but their sensors detected no cities, no industrial activity, and no signs of current habitation. What they did detect was a shell of artificial objects surrounding the planet. Thousands of satellites, space stations, and defensive platforms hung in perfect formation around the world. The technology was unlike anything in the consortium's databases. The power readings from these objects were so strong that they made the expedition's engines look like candles next to a fusion reactor. Commander Nauk ran every scan his ships could perform. The results were impossible to believe. Some of the satellites were larger than his command cruiser, but showed no visible weapons or engines. Others were small, but generated energy fields that could probably destroy a moon. All of them had been sitting in orbit for at least 10,000 years, yet they appeared to be in perfect working condition. Nauk asked his science officer. The science officer, a nervous Kethler named Pisces, checked the readings 3 times before answering. "Sir, these devices aren't just running, they're improving. Our scans show that they've been upgrading and maintaining themselves this entire time. On the planet's surface, their deep scan sensors detected even more impossible things. There were massive structures built into the Earth itself, stretching across entire continents, underground cities that could house millions of beings, and in the deepest chambers, their sensors found heat signatures that looked suspiciously like life support systems. Vexter was practically vibrating with excitement. His skin had turned bright silver, which meant he was beyond pleased and approaching ecstatic. Do you see those energy readings? That's technology worth more than the entire consortium budget. But as their ships moved closer to the planet, something unexpected happened. A signal began broadcasting from the surface. It was weak and old, but their communication systems picked it up. Clearly, the message was in a language none of them had ever heard before. Cathara worked for hours to translate the signal. When she finally succeeded, she read the message aloud to the expedition's command staff. The words made everyone in the room feel very cold. They sleep by choice. The message repeated every few minutes, broadcasting from a single transmitter on the planet's surface. It had been sending the same warning for 10,000 years. Vexter stared at the translation for a long time, then he laughed and shook his head. It's just an automatic system. Scare tactic left behind by whoever built this place. Commander Nauk was not so sure. His warrior instincts told him that something was very wrong with this place. The defensive satellites had tracked their ships from the moment they entered the system. The planet's automated systems were clearly still active and aware. If this was a dead civilization, why were their machines still so alert? But Vexter overruled the military commander concerns. As the expedition's civilian leader, he had the authority to begin excavation operations. He ordered his mining ships to disable the warning beacon and start drilling into the planet's surface. Whatever happened here, Vexter declared, it was 10,000 years ago. As the mining ships moved toward the blue-green world, their crews prepared their equipment and made their plans. They were about to become the richest beings in galactic history by claiming the greatest archaeological find ever discovered. None of them noticed that the defensive satellites had begun to move into new positions. None of them saw the power levels in the underground structures starting to rise, and none of them heard the very faint sound coming from deep within the planet, the sound of ancient machines beginning to wake up. After 10,000 years of patient sleep, expedition had found exactly what they were looking for. Unfortunately for them, what they were looking for had been waiting to be found in the deepest chambers beneath the Earth. Systems that had slumbered for 100 centuries began to activate. Warning signals flashed through networks that spanned the planet. Ancient protocols designed by minds that had reshaped galaxies started their final countdown sequences. The sleepers were beginning to stir, and when they woke up, the galaxy would remember why it had chosen to forget them. The mining drill cut through the Earth like a knife through soft cheese. Vexier watched from the command ship as his crews worked to break into the underground structures. The technology they were using could slice through almost any material in the galaxy, but the planet's crust was putting up surprising resistance. The outer shell is made of some kind of metal alloy, reported Chief Engineer Zalvar over the communication link. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Vexter's skin turned orange with impatience. Use the plasma cutters if you have to. Commander Nauk stood beside Vexter on the command bridge, watching the operation through the viewing screens. His 6 eyes tracked every movement of the mining ships, and his warrior instincts were screaming danger. Warnings. The defensive satellites around the planet had been moving slowly into new positions all day. They weren't threatening the expedition directly, but they were definitely paying attention. Sir, said one of Nauk's tactical officers, the energy readings from the planet are increasing. Enthek studied the sensor displays. Deep beneath the surface, massive power sources were coming online one by one. It looked like an entire city was starting up after being shut down for thousands of years. But Vexter was not interested in caution. His mining crews had finally broken through the outer shell, and what they found made him forget all concerns about danger. The drill had opened a hole into a vast underground chamber filled with strange cylindrical objects arranged in neat rows. They're pods of some kind, reported Engineer Zalvar. Thousands of them, maybe millions, and they're all still active. Vexter's skin turned bright gold again. This was better than he had hoped. Not only had they found advanced technology, but they had discovered a preserved civilization. The scientific and commercial value of this find was beyond calculation. Prepare a survey team, Vexter ordered. I want to know what's in those pods. Cathara joined the survey team that descended into the underground chamber. As an archaeologist, she was trained to study dead civilizations, but this place felt very much alive. The walls glowed with soft light that had no visible source. The air was clean and fresh, as if atmospheric processors had been running continuously for 10,000 years. The chamber was enormous, stretching away into darkness in all directions. The pods were arranged in precise geometric patterns with wide walkways between each section. Each pod was about 2 m long and made of a translucent material that allowed the survey team to see vague shapes inside. Cathara approached the nearest pod and peered through the transparent surface. What she saw made her step backward quickly. Inside the pod was a creature unlike any species she had ever studied. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but smaller than most galactic species. Its skin was pale and smooth, and it had only 2 eyes positioned close together on its face. It looked almost primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding it. These must be the humans, Cathara whispered to herself. According to the ancient records, this was their home world, but the creatures in the pods looked so ordinary, so simple. How could beings that appeared so primitive have built an empire that spanned half the galaxy? Engineer Zalvar was running scans on the pod systems. The life support technology is incredible, he reported. These beings have been in perfect stasis for thousands of years, but their bodies show no signs of aging or deterioration. As the survey team examined more pods, they began to notice something disturbing. Every being in the pods was wearing some kind of uniform or clothing that suggested they were military personnel. Cathara found markings on the pods that her translator slowly decoded as ranks and unit designations. These aren't civilians, she told the team. This is a military installation. But it was too late to worry about that discovery. The mining operation had disturbed too many systems, and ancient protocols were activating throughout the underground complex. Warning lights began flashing in the chamber, and a soft chiming sound echoed from hidden speakers. One of the pods near the survey team started to change. The transparent surface became opaque, and internal mechanisms began moving. Lights appeared on the pod's control panel, and status displays showed readings that none of the aliens could understand. "It's opening," Engineer Zalvar said. With excitement, the pod hissed as internal seals released. Steam or vapor drifted out as the lid slowly opened. The survey team gathered around to see what would emerge from 10,000 years of sleep. The human inside the pod was a female, though the aliens didn't know this at first. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair and sharp features. Her skin was pale from the long sleep, but her eyes were alert and intelligent as they opened and focused on the strain faces looking down at her. Dr. Sarah Chen had been asleep for exactly 9,847 years, 4 months, and 12 days. But her mind was already calculating, processing, and planning as consciousness returned. The faces looking down at her belonged to species she had never seen before, but she recognized them as clearly non-human. Her world had been invaded. While she slept, Sarah did not move or speak immediately. Instead, she listened. The aliens were talking in languages she didn't recognize, but human brain enhancement technology allowed her to learn languages much faster than any natural species could. Within minutes, she understood enough to know what had happened. These beings had found Earth and awakened her people by accident. They spoke of excavation and salvage rights and commercial opportunities. They thought humans were extinct and that their technology was up for grabs. They had no idea what they had done. More pods were opening throughout the chamber as the awakening sequence spread through the facilities systems. Sarah could hear other humans beginning to stir, and she knew that some of them would not be as calm as she was about finding aliens on their home world. When Sarah finally spoke, she used the aliens' own language with perfect pronunciation. Her first words in 10,000 years made every member of the survey team freeze in terror. The aliens stared at her in shock. How could she speak their language? How could she know about the warning beacon they had disabled? And why did her voice sound so calm when she should have been confused and frightened? Sarah sat up in her pod and looked around the chamber. She could see that dozens of other humans were awakening. Nearby, Colonel Marcus Webb, her old commander from the Century Campaign, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the woman who had designed the planet Crackers, Captain Liu Jiang, who had once destroyed an entire enemy fleet using nothing but gravity manipulation. These were not ordinary humans. These were veterans of conflicts that had reshaped star systems. They were soldiers and scientists and engineers who had fought in wars that the current galaxy had no memory of, and every one of them was looking at the alien survey team with expressions of cool, professional assessment. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen," Sarah said as she stepped out of her pod, former strategic operations commander for the Earth Defense Force. Engineer Zalvar tried to explain that they were archaeologists and scientists, that they meant no harm, that they were just exploring, but Sarah's expression did not change as she listened to his stammering words. "You're excavating our burial ground. She said quietly, "You've broken into our tombs and awakened our dead." Other humans were standing now, stretching muscles that hadn't moved in 10 millennia. They moved with easy confidence, as if the long sleep had been nothing more than a night's rest. Some were examining the alien survey team with professional interest. Others were checking weapons that had been stored in their pods. Sarah noticed the aliens' growing fear and raised a hand to signal her fellow humans to remain calm. "We're not going to hurt you," she said. "At least not unless you give us a reason to." She walked over to one of the chambers' wall panels and placed her hand on it. Instantly, holographic displays appeared in the air around them. Star charts, tactical readouts, and status reports filled the chamber with light and information. "We didn't disappear 10,000 years ago," Sarah explained as the displays showed the current positions of human installations throughout the galaxy. "We went asleep. There's a difference." The star charts showed hundreds of star systems marked with human symbols, installations that the current galaxy had classified as ancient ruins were revealing themselves to be fully functional military bases. Asteroid fields that had been mined for resources were actually camouflaged shipyards. Dead worlds were turning out to have populations in the billions. Commander Nauk had been listening to the conversation through his team's communication links. What he heard made his blood run cold. His tactical officers were reporting energy spikes throughout the galaxy as human installations that had been dormant for millennia began coming online. Dr. Chen Nauk's voice came through the chamber's speakers as he patched into their communication systems. "This is Commander Nao of the Galactic Consortium Defense Force. We meant no disrespect to your people." Sarah looked up at the speakers with an expression that might have been amusement if it weren't so cold. "Commander, your people have been mining asteroids in our space for 8,000 years. You've built colonies on our worlds and established trade routes through our territory. You've done this because we allowed it." The holographic displays changed to show surveillance footage of consortium ships and stations throughout the galaxy. The humans had been monitoring galactic civilization for millennia, cataloging every species, mapping every ship movement, and analyzing every political development. "We gave your ancestors 10,000 years of peace," Sarah continued. "We removed ourselves as a factor in galactic politics so that your species could develop without interference. It was a gift." She turned back to face the alien survey team directly. More humans were emerging from their pods throughout the chamber. Sarah could see Captain Zhang activating tactical displays and Dr. Vasquez checking the status of the planetary defense grid. Colonel Webb was already issuing orders to unseen personnel through communication channels that had been silent for 10 millennia. Cathara asked quietly. Sarah smiled, and the expression was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. "Nothing complicated. We want you to pack up your expedition and leave our space. We want your government to acknowledge our territorial claims." Commander Nauk asked through the speaker. Sarah's smile didn't change. "Commander, you have a combined fleet of 12 ships in our system." The holographic displays changed again, showing ship positions throughout the galaxy. The aliens stared in shock as they realized that objects they had classified as asteroid space debris and natural phenomena were actually spacecraft. Thousands of them, millions of them. Fleet so vast that it dwarfed every navy in galactic history combined. "Don't worry," Sarah said as she watched. The aliens struggled to process what they were seeing. "We're not going to hurt you. We're civilized people." She paused and looked around the chamber at her awakening colleagues. "But we also believe in being very clear about consequences. You've reminded the galaxy that we exist. That's fine." The humans had awakened, and they were about to give the galaxy a very polite reminder of what they were capable of. The emergency session of the Galactic Consortium Council was unlike any meeting in recorded history. Representatives from 847 species filled the Great Hall on Nexus Prime, their voices creating a chaos of fear and confusion. In the 3 days since humanity had awakened, the entire galaxy had been thrown into panic. Quentin sat at the head of the council table, their ancient face grave with worry. For the first time in 8 centuries of service, the ethereal elder looked truly frightened. Around the table, species representatives shouted questions and demands in dozens of languages. Quentin called, their voice carrying the authority of 1,000 years. Abai. The hall fell silent as emergency reports poured in from across the galaxy. What they contained was beyond anything the council had prepared for. Admiral Cox of the Consortium Defense Fleet stood to address the council. Four-armed Zirian's usually steady voice shook as he read from his data pad. "In the past 72 hours, we have identified over 50,000 previously unknown installations throughout Consortium space." The holographic display above the council table showed a map of known space. Red dots appeared on the map, each one representing a newly discovered human installation. There were so many red dots that they covered nearly half the galaxy. Demanded Council Member Tyrexa of the Andorian Republic. "Our surveys have mapped every system in this galaxy." Admiral Cox's expression was grim. "Because they didn't want to be found. Our analysis indicates that these installations have been using advanced stealth technology for thousands of years." Dr. Nethqua, the Council's chief scientist, stood to present her findings. The Kethler researchers' normally calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled terror. "We've been analyzing the technology displays the humans showed to the archaeological team." The holographic display changed to show technical readouts from human devices. The energy signatures were beyond anything in Consortium databases. Their basic power cells generate more energy than our largest fusion reactors. Dr. Netha continued, "Their computing systems process information at speed that should be theoretically impossible." Council Member Vexinar, who had originally dismissed the human evidence as mythology, was now pale with fear. "What about their military capabilities?" Admiral Cox called up another display showing known human ship positions, 7 million vessels of various sizes. The council chamber erupted in frightened voices. Some representatives called for immediate military action, while others demanded negotiations. A few suggested that the consortium should surrender immediately and hope for mercy. But it was Quentin who asked the most important question. As if in answer to their question, every communication system in the council chamber activated simultaneously. The humans were calling. Dr. Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main display transmitted from the underground facility on Earth. She looked calm and professional, as if she were attending a routine diplomatic meeting rather than addressing the leaders of galactic civilization. "Honored council members," Sarah said. With perfect politeness, "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking on behalf of the human colonial administration." Quentin found their voice first. "Dr. Chen, we welcome this communication." Sarah's smile was friendly, but somehow made everyone in the chamber feel cold. "We appreciate that sentiment, Council Elder." The display changed to show star charts marking human territorial claims. The representatives stared in shock as they realized that humanity was claiming sovereignty over systems that currently housed billions of consortium citizens. "We understand that our absence created some confusion about territorial boundaries," Sarah continued. "During our sleep, various species established colonies and settlements in systems that belong to us." Council member Trexa stood angrily. "You can't simply claim half the galaxy." Sarah's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the council chamber seemed to drop. "Counselor, our territorial claims predate your civilizations by several thousand years." The display showed historical records dating back 12,000 years. Human exploration ships had mapped and claimed these systems long before any current galactic species had achieved space flight. However, Sarah continued, "We're not unreasonable. We understand that displacing billions of beings would cause significant hardship." Admiral Cox leaned forward. Sarah's list was surprisingly modest. The humans wanted formal recognition of their territorial sovereignty, access to current galactic databases and historical records, and what they called compensation for unauthorized resource extraction during their sleep. "The compensation is quite reasonable," Sarah explained. 7 trillion tons of materials from our systems over the past 8,000 years. The number was larger than the total economic output of the entire consortium for the past century. Several council members fainted. "Of course, we don't expect immediate payment," Sarah said kindly. "We prepared to accept a reasonable payment plan." Quinta struggled to find words. "Doctor." "Absolutely," Sarah agreed. "We believe in fair and open negotiation." The display changed again, this time showing current positions of the Consortium Defense Fleet. Every ship in the galaxy was highlighted in red, indicating that the humans were tracking all of them in real time. "We've noticed that your military forces are mobilizing," Sarah observed. What followed was a presentation that turned the blood of every military officer the council chamber to ice. The humans detailed their ship classifications, weapon systems, and defensive technologies with the casual air of someone discussing their garden. "Our basic combat vessels are equipped with what we call reality anchors," Sarah explained. "These devices allow us to selectively modify local physics within a limited range." The display showed test footage of human weapons in action. A single human ship faced off against a target fleet of 1,000 vessels. Within seconds, the entire enemy fleet was floating helplessly as their engines fired in random directions and their weapons discharged into empty space. "For more serious threats, we have planet crackers," Sarah continued. "These weapons can destabilize a world's core, causing it to break apart from the inside. We also have star killers which can cause a sun to go nova on command." Several more council members fainted. Others began praying to whatever deities their species worshipped. But please don't worry, Sarah added. Cheerfully, we only use those weapons in extreme circumstances. Council member Vexnar, his voice barely a whisper, asked the question everyone was thinking. How? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. That's a complex question, counselor. The short answer is that we've had a very long time to develop our technology. She paused as if trying to find the right words. Most galactic species develop technology to solve specific problems. You build faster ships to travel more quickly or bigger guns to fight more effectively. The display showed human research facilities where scientists casually worked with forces that could reshape solar systems. Children played with toys that incorporated technology beyond the consortium's understanding. We learned to rewrite the laws of physics because we were curious about how they worked. Sarah explained, we built weapons that could destroy universes because we wanted to see if it was possible. Quentin finally managed to ask the question that had been haunting them since Cathara's discovery. Why did you go to sleep? Sarah's smile was sad now, and for the first time she looked truly human. Because we were becoming monsters, Elder Quintus. Our power was growing faster than our wisdom. She gestured to the displays showing human capabilities. This technology, it changes you when you can reshape reality with a thought, when you can create or destroy worlds on a whim, when death and time and distance become mere inconveniences. The council chamber was completely silent now. Everyone understood what Sarah was really telling them. We chose to sleep because we were in danger of becoming gods, Sarah concluded, and gods by their very nature tend to forget that their subjects are real people with real feelings and real rights. Quentin's leaned forward, and now, Sarah considered the question carefully. Now we find out if 10,000 years of sleep taught us the wisdom we were lacking. We're going to try very hard to be good neighbors, Elder Quintus, but the galaxy needs to understand that we're not asking for permission to exist. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside the building, across Nexus Prime and throughout the galaxy, people looked up at the stars and wondered what would happen next. The humans were awake. They were polite, reasonable, and terrifyingly powerful. And they wanted to be friends. Somehow that was the most frightening thing of all. 3 months after humanity's awakening, the galaxy had settled into a new and uncomfortable normal. Cathara stood in the viewing gallery, watching the proceedings below. As the archaeologist who had started this entire crisis, she felt a special responsibility to see how it ended. The blue-skinned Zaharian had aged years in just a few months, the stress of galactic upheaval taking its toll on her usually calm demeanor. Below on the conference floor, Dr. Sarah Chen sat at a table with 3 other humans. They looked so ordinary compared to the exotic aliens around them. No impressive size like the Krillians, no multiple arms like the hegemony, no natural armor like the Zeerons. They looked like the kind of beings that any reasonable species might keep as pets. But everyone in the hall treated them with the careful respect usually reserved for dangerous explosives. The negotiations had been surprisingly smooth. The humans had presented their territorial claims with perfect documentation and historical proof. They had offered reasonable terms for existing colonies in their space. They had even provided technological gifts as gestures of goodwill. The gifts were the most unsettling part. In just 3 months, human scientists had solved energy crises that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. They had shared medical technology that could extend any species lifespan by 500%. They had given the consortium transportation systems that made their fastest ships look like rowboats. It's like giving children toy versions of their parents' tools. Sarah had explained when asked about the gifts. The comment had sent chills through every species representative. If these miraculous technologies were just toys by human standards, what did their real equipment look like? Admiral Cox approached Cathara in the viewing gallery. The CN officer looked like he had lost weight since the crisis began, his forearms hanging listlessly at his sides. Cathara asked. The admiral nodded grimly. They found 17 more human installations in what we thought were empty systems, each one bigger than our largest space stations. Cathara stared down at the 4 humans sitting calmly in the conference hall. 10 billion. That's what frightens me most, Admiral Cox admitted. They don't seem to need constant communication with their leadership. Down on the conference floor, the session was reaching its conclusion. The final accords had been drafted and were ready for signature. The terms were generous by any reasonable standard, but they established a new reality that made everyone uncomfortable. Humanity was now officially recognized as the senior partner in galactic civilization. They held territorial sovereignty over nearly half of known space. They had the right to intervene in any conflict that threatened galactic stability. And they had been granted something called protective oversight of primitive species and dangerous technologies. Council member Tyrexa had asked during an earlier session. Dr. Chen had smiled her polite, terrifying smile. It means we'll be keeping an eye on things. The threat was delivered so gently that it took several minutes for its full implications to sink in. Humanity was not conquering the galaxy. They were simply letting everyone know that they were watching. As the accords were signed, Quintus rose to make a final statement. The ancient ethereal moved slowly to the podium, their 1,000 years of experience unable to prepare them for this moment. Today marks the beginning of a new era in galactic history. Quinth began. The word sounded hollow in the vast hall. Everyone present knew that this wasn't cooperation between equals. This was a more powerful civilization, choosing to be polite to its inferiors. Dr. Chen rose to respond. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the hall without any need for amplification. The human colonial administration thanks the Galactic Consortium for their warm welcome, she said. She paused, looking around the hall at the representatives of 8 and 47 species. We want to be very clear about our intentions. Humanity has no desire to rule over other species or to interfere in your internal affairs. Dr. Chen activated a holographic display that showed historical records from before humanity's hibernation. The images were nightmare visions of wars that had consumed entire star systems, weapons that had torn holes in reality itself, and species that had attempted to become gods through technology. This is what the galaxy looked like when we went asleep, Dr. Chen explained. species destroying each other with weapons that could unravel the fabric of space, civilizations ascending to higher dimensions and leaving dead realities behind them. The images changed to show the peaceful galaxy that had existed during humanity's sleep. No system-killing wars, no reality-threatening experiments, no species extinction events. This is what the galaxy became when we removed ourselves from the equation. Dr. Chen continued, 847. Species living in relative peace and prosperity. Conflicts resolved through diplomacy, rather than planet crackers. She turned back to face the assembly. We want to preserve this peace. Council member Vexnar raised his hand. Nervously, how will this oversight function will you be installing? Governors on our worlds, Dr. Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. Nothing so intrusive, counselor. We simply be monitoring galactic communications, keeping track of research developments, and maintaining a presence in key systems. The casual admission that humanity had been monitoring all galactic communications sent another wave of fear through the assembly. How long had they been watching? How much did they know about each species' secrets? What happens if we asked Admiral Cox? Dr. Chen considered the question seriously. Admiral, disagreement is natural and healthy. We expect different species to have different perspectives and different needs. She paused and her expression became more serious. However, there are certain lines that cannot be crossed. Research into universe-killing weapons, attempts to achieve godhood through technology, experiments that could destabilize reality itself. Quentin was asked quietly. Then we'll stop them, Dr. Chen replied, with terrifying simplicity, politely if possible. The signing ceremony concluded without further discussion. As the representatives dispersed, Cathara noticed that many species delegates were making immediate plans to return to their home worlds. Everyone wanted to brief their governments on the new reality as quickly as possible. But a few representatives lingered, approaching the human delegation with questions and requests. Dr. Chen answered each inquiry with patience and courtesy, but Cathara noticed that she never gave detailed answers about human capabilities or intentions. Admiral Cox Teth joined Cathara as they watched the humans interact with other species. Cathara considered the question they would have awakened. Eventually, maybe not for another 1,000 years, but eventually. Then we didn't cause this crisis. Admiral said hopefully. No, Cathara replied softly as the conference hall emptied. Dr. Chen approached the viewing gallery where Cathara and Admiral Cox were standing. The human woman climbed the steps with easy grace, showing no sign of the tremendous responsibility she carried. Dr. Eki Cathara stared at her in confusion. Thank me, I'm the one who disturbed your people's sleep. Sarah shook her head. You gave us something we desperately needed, a reason to wake up. She looked out through the gallery windows at the stars beyond. Your discovery reminded us of our responsibilities. The galaxy needs guardians, whether it wants them or not. Admiral Cox found his courage. Doctor, are we safe? Sarah's smile was gentle and completely genuine. Admiral, you're safer now than your species has been in 10,000 years. Humanity doesn't make war on children. The words should have been comforting, but somehow they made both aliens feel very small and very young. The question isn't whether you're safe. From us, Sarah continued. The question is whether you're ready to grow up, because someday your species will develop the kind of power that we possess. She turned to face them directly. Will you use your power responsibly? Will you remember that strength exists to protect those who are weaker? Sarah began walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back. We'll be watching, of course, but we hope that when your species reaches full maturity, you'll make better choices than we did. As the human woman disappeared into the corridor, Cathera and Admiral Cox stood in silence. Around them, the empty conference hall seemed vast and cold. She called it humanity, Cathara whispered, the quality of remembering, compassion, and responsibility. Admiral Cox nodded slowly. Outside the conference hall, across Nexus Prime and throughout the galaxy, beings of 847 different species went about their daily lives under the watchful eyes of their new guardians. Children played in parks while invisible sensors monitored their games. Scientists conducted research while hidden observers ensured they stayed within safe parameters. Politicians made speeches while ancient minds analyzed every word for signs of dangerous ambition. The galaxy was at peace. It was prosperous and safe and carefully protected by beings with the power to rewrite reality itself, and everyone knew that this peace existed only because humanity allowed it. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Consortium, a new historical record was added to the files. It contained a single line of text that would be remembered long after all current civilizations had faded into history. For 10,000 years, humanity slept so that others could dream of peace. The age of human oversight had begun. Whether it would be remembered as a golden era or a gentle tyranny would depend entirely on whether the children of the galaxy could learn to be worthy of their guardians' trust. But that was a question for future generations to answer. For now, the galaxy slept safely, watched over by beings who had sacrificed their own innocence to preserve everyone else's dreams.